Here's a million medications that you have to give your cat. I will frequently use appetite stimulants in cats. Mirtazapine is kind of my initial go-to. And the reason is that you give it every 3 days. So in the hospital, I can give them, my injections, my fluids, give them 1 dose of mirtazapine. It'll last for 3 days. And then if they're still not eating, then we can continue it or pursue further testing. But that way it's one less thing the owner has to give at home. If they need to be hospitalized, then they're given IV fluids, and they're given a lot of those same injections, but they're kept in the hospital anywhere between 12 to 72 hours, depending on the severity. At my clinic, we do not hospitalize overnight because we're not 24-hour, and I don't want a patient to be on fluids when there's no one watching them. So if they do need 24-hour care, at the end of the day, they are transferred to a 24-hour facility. And then usually at that point, it's determined how long they need to stay hospitalized. But most of these guys, if it is an acute case, recover fairly quickly. We recheck. If we ran that special quantitative pancreatitis test, we will reevaluate that usually about 2 weeks in the future, assuming they're continuing to resolve. And I like to recheck them about a week later. And that is not a short summary of pancreatitis, but I hope that gives you kind of some information about, what causes it, how we treat it. And going back, just kind of circling back to the very beginning of this conversation, when I mentioned those alpha macroglobulins, when I was an intern, one of the ways that we thought we were supposed to treat pancreatitis is by giving them plasma transfusions. And in part, the reason we thought that was because plasma transfusions contain alpha macroglobulins, which those are one of the circulating stabilizers that keep the pancreatic enzymes inside the zymogens, inside those protective capsules. The downside with plasma transfusions is they have to be hospitalized usually for like 4 hours while we give it, and it is relatively expensive. So we don't do that really anymore. It was interesting because it was really popular for like 3 years, a year before I graduated and then 2 years after, and now it's not done anymore. But if you have a veterinarian who recommends a plasma transfusion, it's not wrong. It's just there's no real evidence that proves that it actually is helpful. That being said, in cases of really severe acute pancreatitis and they're really, really sick and you're worried that they could go into DIC, a fresh frozen plasma transfusion is still a great idea because at that point anything can help. So again, I hope that kind of sheds some light on pancreatitis. The moral of the story is just be careful what you feed your dog. And cats rarely, sometimes they eat people food, sometimes they don't. It really depends on what they want to eat. But in cats, the fat issue is not as big of a deal. But if you do have a kitty that just periodically seems like they're vomiting or they're not feeling well or they go off their feed, you may want to consider having them checked by your veterinarian just to make sure there isn't something more going on. And with that said, I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving. I think that about wraps it up. As always, thank you for listening to this installment of Vetsplaining. I hope you enjoyed your time with me and ideally learned at least one new thing for the day. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, feel free to leave a comment below or email info@independenthillvet.com and put podcast topic or podcast comment in the subject line. Until next time.